we want to tell you about another podcast from PRX called Monumental. This podcast explores questions about the past, present, and future of U.S. monuments, uncovering the stories about what and who is important, as well as the stories that have been left out. Join host Ashley Seaford across the country with their team of journalists. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey everyone, welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History. Jody Avirgan here. This is part 2 of our October surprise special that was recorded in front of a live audience at WBUR's City Space in Boston, Massachusetts. If you haven't listened to part 1, maybe go check that out, and then we will dive right into part 2. We're going through some basic categories of October surprises through the years. We've looked at gaffes, stuff that candidates have said at the last minute that have upended a race. We've looked at unforeseen events in the world that have upended a race. We've looked at things the press has dug up. And now it is time to look at the shadier stuff, the shenanigans that happen often at the end of a presidential election. Our special guest for this, of course, is comedian Josh Gondelman, along with Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kelly Carter-Jackson of Wellesley, and a live audience. Now, before we get into it, another reminder that there is some stuff that we did on this very special night that we are going to put in the newsletter only. So go and subscribe to our newsletter, thisdaypod.com. You can find a sign up there. And while you're at it, go ahead and check out the merch store and all of the other stuff available on our website. Anyway, here we go. Part 2, October Surprises, live from Boston. All right. Let's move on to our next category. We'll rip through a few of these because we want to leave time for shady stuff at the end. But this is stuff that happens in the world. Foreign events that sort of upend things and often, I think, shift the tone of an election from domestic matters to foreign affairs. So I'm going to list 2 here real quick. One in 1956, one in 1964. So in 56, this was an election that was largely around Brown v. Board and was about sort of domestic issues. And then there is a uprising in Hungary. You all remember the uprising in Hungary. And a Suez Canal crisis in 56. And it really does shift the election. And citizens kind of rally around Eisenhower in that moment. And it helps kind of move the election in his direction.
I know about the Suez Canal incident exclusively from the end of that one verse of We Didn't Start the Fire.
Oh, it's in there?
Where Billy Joel goes, trouble in the Suez. Really? Oh, that's what that
there
is.
You go.
Yeah.
We really should mine that song. 1964, there is it's LBJ versus Goldwater, and basically there's like nuclear weapons tests between USSR and China, and everyone's like, oh, right, remember that? And it kind of makes Goldwater's very sort of saber-rattling, inflammatory rhetoric a little less appealing to voters, and LBJ prevails. Funnily enough, that one also crowded out what could have potentially been another October surprise, which is that LBJ's top aide, Walter Jenkins, was arrested for disorderly conduct with another man in the Washington, D.C. YMCA. But lucky for him, they decided to test nuclear weapons in the U.S.
How do you know that's not a wag the dog kind of thing, where he's like, here's some nuclear weapons?
That's how wild things were in living memory in the United States, that like being gay was the same as international nuclear warfare.
Which one is going to upend?
Yeah. Which one? Right. Which one do people care about more? It's an open question.
1992, on October 1st, I wasn't fully aware of this election, but we've done episodes on this, but that Ross Perot re-entered on October 1st. I mean, that is late in the game.
Crazy.
And he got 15% of the vote. He'd been in, he went out, he came back in, he got 15% of the vote.
19%.
19% of the vote.
That's a lot.
That's so much.
Yeah.
People forget how much that was.
Yes.
A lot.
Not us, Josh.
Not us. Not us. But that's so much because people go, is Jill Stein going to change things with half of a percent?
RFK is 1%.
Yeah.
Ross
Perot was out here winning 19% of the vote, coming in October like a guy who shows up late to a birthday party. I brought wine. I guess we're still drinking wine.
And political scientists spent like decades arguing, did it affect? It's like 19% of the vote. Like,
It did something.
Did something.
Not nothing.
It's unlikely that the voter, it was like one for me, one for you for Clinton and Bush Sr.
2004, on October 27th, Osama bin Laden released a video claiming responsibility for the 9/11 attacks and calling Bush a dictator who repressed freedom by means of the Patriot Act. So coming out against the Patriot Act. And I don't know, do we have thoughts on this? I mean, I think largely speaking, it kind of reinforced that Bush and bin Laden are locked in some sort of mortal fight, which probably reinforced Bush's kind of pro-war what he was running on in 2004.
I don't think in 2004 when bin Laden said that American freedoms are being taken away under the Patriot Act, I don't think we were yet nationally in a place to acknowledge that sometimes, rarely, not the big ones, Osama bin Laden had a point.
We're just going to clip that.
We weren't. I know how podcasts work. I just don't think we weren't in 2004. If I'd said that on a stage, someone in a pickup truck would have driven through the window at the front of this venue and put me in the bed and then just driven away. You'd never see me again. It would be me and the Dixie Chicks just gone for 20 years. Sorry, I talked right over you. That was so weird.
The chicks found out, so that's all.
Sorry, the chicks. I didn't mean to dead name the chicks.
Seamless transition to 2008 economic collapse. Here's another October surprise. So this has been obviously brewing for much of 2007 into 2008. But, if we remember those heady days of the fall 2008, joblessness reaches a 14-year high. The global economy is on the brink of disaster. We're starting to feel the effects of the Great Recession in the middle of the McCain versus Obama race.
And I remember McCain suspending his campaign for a little bit because he's like, I'm going to go work on this problem. And then he didn't really work on the problem, which was wild to me. I mean, and then does he pull out of the debate? I feel like.
Well, he says he's going to. So to me, this is the big actual impact here is McCain just showed real unsteadiness in that moment. So he says he's going to suspend his campaign. I remember standing in the newsroom at WMIC and seeing that and being like, that was a mistake. Like, this guy's cooked. Yeah. But then he says he's going to suspend it to go work on the TARP, which was the first one?
Yeah, the bailout bill.
And then then it comes out that he's not actually part of the small group that's negotiating that. So he's just like milling around in the Senate waiting to vote. And then he says he's not going to do the debate, which was scheduled for 4 days later. But then he actually does do the debate. And it was just that unsteadiness.
It's not very presidential.
No.
Well, and Obama at the time was just like, we can chew gum and walk at the same time. And in fact, that's the job.
Yeah.
So it was a real moment for Obama. I remember that because I grew up in Indiana, and that the devastation that happened economically happened so fast and was so unsettling and unmooring that the state of Indiana voted for Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And it was because of the financial crisis and how devastating it was, particularly in the northern part of the state.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I need to look at looking at old electoral maps. Like,
it's wild.
You're like, wait, what?
10 years ago.
I know, but still,
North
you're like,
Carolina,
Indiana,
Even
North Carolina.
Talking about earlier tonight about how California was a swing state.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, whoa, that's like, and it's also, I wonder how many electoral votes it had back then.
A lot less.
Yeah. We then got there.
All right. Trump got COVID on October 2nd, 2020. We don't have to get too far into that, but it was maybe
Everyone thought he was gonna die.
Twitter's greatest night.
Yeah, it
I'll
ruled.
say that.
It rolled.
20,
It was so funny.
But I want to do one more. I want to do one more kind of out of nowhere, really worth digging into, and then Josh will take us to the rat fucking.
How many times have you heard that
you
one?
made that sound like that's like a bar I know. He's from here. He'll take us to the rat fucking. It's where TT and the Bears used to be.
2016, the Comey letter. This is, I'll talk through the various narratives here, but there is a narrative that this is maybe the October surprise that really did have a big effect on an election. So on October 28th, then FBI Director James Comey announces in a letter to Congress that he would take, quote, appropriate investigative steps to review additional emails related to Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. This was announced because they had discovered new emails on a seized laptop belonging to
Anthony Weiner.
Anthony Weiner. Remember this? Anthony Weiner's laptop.
Guy.
This fucking guy.
No, I know.
So Anthony Weiner's laptop makes its way to the FBI. They find some new emails there. It sort of dredges back up this email scandal, non-scandal, but it gives the imprimatur of an FBI investigation on October 28th. Did this affect the election? So I'm going to sort of lay out the case in both directions. So the case 4 is kind of what I think very quickly after the election was the prevailing wisdom. So if you look at like the 538 polling averages for that for those weeks, Clinton had a nearly 6-point lead heading into right before the Comey letters released, and a 3-point lead 1 week later. So it's just a 3-point shift in a very close election, basically hinging right around that letter. The case against, which I think has emerged more recently, is that a lot of polls go into an average like that, and there is a delay between when you conduct a poll, you run the numbers, and then you announce it. And a number of those most impactful polls were taken like the night before the letter was came out, but then released like 3 days later, and they get thrown into the pot with the average and are kind of smoothed out and tell this story of the Comey letter being this hinge moment. The other thing, if you'll remember in there, is that was where the third debate was right in those days. And to me, and I remember thinking at the time, the third debate was a real hinge moment in that it really did good things for Clinton, but it happened just far enough from Election Day that her support was starting to erode in the wake of that. And that was right where the Comey letter. So, there's the eroding support from the debate. There's the Comey letter. There's this sort of poll lag. And then Election Day happens. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of people like to pin. A lot of people don't like James Comey for writing this letter. A lot of people like to pin it on him. I don't know if any of you have thoughts.
Don't like James Comey.
Okay.
It feels like a weird choice.
Yeah.
Like, what a strange... First of all, there's so many of these that are about letters being written, which feels quaint and old-timey. But, yeah, I don't know. I think, again, a thing that I don't like about politics is that sometimes the appearance of propriety, which is what Comey was very concerned with, takes precedence over substance, which is there are emails on a laptop, right? That's what he was saying. Is like, we'll see what was on those emails. So it's very weird to me because it felt so seismic, but it was just, hey, we got a laptop with emails. We're looking for this guy's dick. But maybe there's some other emails too.
Yeah.
The Heart is here with an all-new series. It's called Great Love, The Gaza Monologues Revisited. Fellow Radiotopian Caitlin Prest teamed up with Ashtar Theater in Ramallah, Palestine, to turn their famed play into radio magic that looks at what's happening in Gaza today. Each episode features one of Ashtar Theater's 33 Gaza monologues, performed by people around the globe. KP, our Canadian host, messily trying to figure out how to do activism. A comedian from Jenin in the West Bank, making people laugh and cry at the same time. A 19-year-old med student and her 2 brothers, who just arrived in Cairo from the north of Gaza, trying to figure out how to enroll in school and start a new life with their family, and everything they know still in grave danger back home.
Can you hear the blasts? This is a trauma for me. I hate it. I know I'm in Egypt. I'm not in Gaza. Every time we hear this voice, we know that, oh my God, a disaster will come.
I have been a volunteer in a Shifa hospital. People there faced hundreds of types of deaths.
They just shoot. They don't feel that we are a people. We have no relation with what happened the 7th of October. Like, I'm a student. What about my future? My family, my friends, my life.
Talk to the Israeli leaders.
That's kind of conversation between the sword and the neck, you mean?
You could still talk.
Talk about what?
Talk about the possibility of not fighting.
Not fighting for what?
We don't have the chance to die in a peaceful way.
Do you condemn Hamas Like, how can you say that after so many children have died?
You know that we are surprised that we faced all of this and we are not got crazy yet.
Why?
Tell me why.
We have to be crazy now.
The true revolutionary is guided by feelings of
great love on the heart.
In typical Heart fashion, KP and her team address this harrowing topic in a way that ends up being heartwarming, soul-crushing, and funny at the same time. The series explores the kind of love that makes it so that you care about people far away that you haven't met yet, and shows the way that love turns into real bonds that form in the wake of a historic atrocity. Episodes drop every Thursday. Listen and subscribe at mermaidpalace.org or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right. Our final category, shady stuff, as if what we've heard over the course of the last 45 minutes isn't shady enough. We have some stuff that very squarely falls into the shady category, and Josh is going to lead us through some of these.
Great. So we're going back to the 19th century once more, 1880, a fake pro-immigration letter. On October 20th, 1880, the New York Truth, which is not a publication that only exists on Facebook, published a 3-sentence letter, which, to the point, purportedly written by Republican nominee James A. Garfield. The note was addressed to H.L. Morey of Lynn, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
That's right. And it voiced support for Chinese immigration to the U.S. and expressed the opinion that employers had the right, quote, to buy labor where they can get it the cheapest. So the Democratic and Republican platforms had, as well as Garfield himself, had endorsed restrictions on Chinese immigration. So this letter kind of destabilized the conversation and turned it into a contest of who can be more racist. Really? So Garfield at first didn't know whether he'd written the letter or not.
That's the best part about it.
That's the best part. Because there was a moment where he was like, sounds like me.
Could have done it.
So that this letter gets spread all over the place. It's really talked up. And then by the time Garfield sees the letter and goes, I didn't write that. It's too late, and people have all heard it. Garfield beat his opponent, Winfred Scott Hancock, of course, by only 0.02 percentage points in the popular vote, and he lost California, the state most affected by Chinese immigration. Then after the election, the letter's author was revealed to be Kenward Phillip, a New York Truth journalist who was later arrested and indicted for fraud. Fucking obviously.
A reporter for the New York Truth.
New York Truth.
Writes a fake-ass letter.
That really feels like the New York press version of Jonah Ryan's website on Veep. Ryanthology.
Remarkable. All right.
It's wild.
Back to Vietnam, 1968.
LBJ had previously announced a halt to bombing and the start of peace talks, propelling Humphrey above Nixon in the polls because people wanted peace. Nixon responded by reaching out to South Vietnam's president through back channels, encouraging him not to attend peace talks and assuring him that if Nixon was elected, South Vietnam could expect stronger support from his administration than it would get from Johnson or Humphrey. So Nixon saying, you don't want peace. You want me to come in and do better war. And then 3 days before the election, the South Vietnamese withdrew from the peace talks and Humphrey lost the momentum. By that point, LBJ had learned that Nixon was interfering in international affairs and had begun wiretapping the Nixon campaign, justifying some of Nixon's paranoia. And then Humphrey chose not to make Nixon's actions public, however, and lost to his Republican opponent on election day. So this is one of those October non-surprises.
Yeah.
Is this the shadiest thing we've encountered so far? Scuttling peace talks?
This is the worst.
Yeah.
This is terrible.
Yeah.
He scuttles the peace talks in Vietnam. Johnson can't say anything because he wasn't supposed to be wiretapping his plane. So you've got layers of problems here. But yeah, a lot of people die after 68.
Yeah.
And that's on Nixon.
Yeah, it is. The idea that you could have gotten peace sooner and you advocated against it for your own personal gain is abhorrent.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can top that.
I just want to go back to what I said earlier, and you can take this in any context you want. You gotta trust Kissinger. 1980. days before U.S. voters cast their ballots, Iran announced that it would not release hostages until after the election. They would be released eventually minutes after Reagan completed his inaugural address in 1981. And this is also kind of what Trump has claimed he could do, right, for detained journalists, who have since been released. But he was saying, I'm the only guy. I'm going to get this deal done, and they'll do it once I'm elected. 2 congressional investigations found no evidence of a conspiracy between Reagan and Iran. Trump, you don't have to find a conspiracy. He literally says it on TV. However, many people have since confirmed there were nefarious backroom discussions going on. Reagan chairman William J. Casey was alleged to have met with representatives of Iran in July and August 1980 in Madrid, which just seems nice that time of year, leading to a deal supposedly finalized in Paris, beautiful, in October, in which a future Reagan administration would ship arms to Tehran through Israel in exchange for hostages being held until after the election. And there are absolutely no present-day resonances of that sentence.
Yeah, I think this is the October surprise this is the story where I first kind of came to understand this idea of an October surprise as a shady thing. And it's funny that it brings us full circle because it was the thing that they were proclaiming and trying to prevent by getting it out there. And then they realized, hey, wait a minute, maybe meddling with the hostages could do us some good.
I mean, it's been said already, but it's so despicable when like people's lives are treated as pawns in that way. And it's like such a normal thing, and it like kind of drives me up a wall to be like, but don't do that. Yeah. That's people.
Do good things and not bad things.
Do good things and not bad things. It's such a good point. Yes. That's how I feel. I'm like, don't do the good thing.
So simple.
You're absolutely right.
All right. So to wrap up, I want to come back to some of those central questions. One is, I'm curious, Kelly, like, do you feel like, having gone through this, how much of it matter is it about the fact that it's just simply happening towards the end, and that it's happening when voters are most at attention, when media is most at attention, and it's like the last thing we remember before we vote. Yeah. And so when we write the story of an election, we happen to point at it, or are some of these legit big left turn stories?
I think for bad news always sticks more than good news does. And I think if you are on the fence, and this is what I think maybe I struggle with because our society is so polarized now. We're like, who is on the fence? Like, really? But when we think about if you are on the fence and you get this bad news, will it sway or will it influence when you go into this ballot box? And I think some of that is a little legit. I don't know how much weight we can put on that, though. Yeah. And how much it matters, if this happened in the summer, do people still remember when you get to the ballot box? But yeah, timing is everything.
I mean, all of these seem to reinforce an existing theme, which I think is one of the sort of fundamental things to understand about a scandal, is it sticks when it pushes in a direction that things are already kind of pushing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so in that regard, it's kind of like the straw that breaks the camel's back more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think also additionally, because that's such a smart point, Kelly, and I think additionally we were talking about an election with 76% turnout. Now we're down to 40. So in addition to swaying people one way or the other when they're in the ballot box, I think some of these might have made people go, why would I go to the ballot box?
Exactly. That's a good point too. Yeah. The apathy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if we're at the end of the October surprise now that politics have become more, everybody's got their team, but also now that it's, what would have to happen to shock you in October?
Talk about things we're going to clip and play later.
Sorry, I should be knocking on wood, but I think we've hit everything already this election cycle.
Okay. I kind of have an opposite diagnosis, which is that maybe we should make everything October surprise. To me, one of the things that I'm thinking about in the wake of this is, and I've been thinking about it because of the way this election has played out, is maybe our elections should be a lot shorter. And maybe it should all...
That's true.
Maybe it should just all be October.
Yes.
And then every surprise is an October surprise.
An advent calendar.
Yeah.
Yes.
But really, I mean, it is one of my wishes when we kind of tell the story of this election is that maybe because of the way it played out with Biden dropping out and Harris coming in and a sort of crest of enthusiasm and the realization that, like, we didn't need to have been living with these people for the last 8 months in an election. We can just start it now. Maybe this country will change that. And I think elections should be short. A lot of other countries do it the same way. And I think this proves that, like, the stuff we remember, the stuff that matters is in that last window anyway. So I don't know. Maybe it should all be an October surprise. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Josh Gondelman, thank you so much for doing this. This was really great.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was such a pleasure to get to be dumb with all you brilliant people. You were so smart and I was so silly.
Nicole Hemmer, thanks to you.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kelly Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
But I'll just say thank you also to a lot of the people who helped make this show who are in the room tonight. So Jacob and Brittany and Audrey and Yuri and Carrie and Gretchen and Gina and Maggie, all the other Radiotopia folks who are here, Stephen, Avi, and everyone else at WBUR City Space. Thank you for helping us put on this show. And, of course, thanks to all of you who came out to join us. Give yourself a round of applause.
Radiotopia.